So, good morning again, and welcome to this workshop session, conference, or whatever you want to call it. Thanks to the 110 attendees right now, which will probably still increase. And let's start this interesting meeting. My welcome is not from myself, but from the EnR network and from the EnR Industry Enterprises Working Group, together with the speakers and the panelists for the second part of the meeting. What is the EnR? Again, as mentioned in the coffee break, the pre-coffee break, the e-coffee, we have a lot of familiar faces, but someone may be not familiar, of course, with this network. The European Energy Network is a voluntary network which is was established in 1990, which gathers the national energy agencies of the European area, not only European Union, but also surroundings. At present, we are 24 national energy agencies. This number varies alongside the time. Some agencies get in, some others may get out for changes in the political landscape, but at present we are a quite strong network of 24 national agencies. What is the main goal of the EnR? Promotion of energy efficiency, renewable energy policies, more in general sustainable policy implementation, programs and national or European initiatives. The core probably of the EnR is the collaboration and the cooperation among national energy agencies to make the best from what we learn at national levels and bring this to an international level. So this way we can also try to solve some issues that everyone finds in its own everyday work. Please go to the next slide. What is the Industry and Enterprises Working Group? It is one of the 8, and that will be maybe become 9 working groups of this network, which covers the topic of industry, as it has usually been, and since a couple of years also enterprises. So mostly SMEs, but not only SMEs, also large enterprises. So we aim to to share our everyday policy implementation practices, everyday researches, everyday analysis, and everyday findings that we have and we do in our job at the national level. We meet periodically with the working group, we meet online, we meet in person. Our activities are internal knowledge sharing, sessions with external conferences, participation to consultations, and when we can, we also make some work together in EU-funded projects. Always within the head of industry and or enterprises, with also focus on SMEs. This working group is quite long-lasting. I'm happily sharing this from 2019, and at present this working group contains 19 national energy agencies or authorities, with the external support of some others, and from one external ministry from a non-European country. One of the activities we are carrying out together in EU-funded projects, as you can see here, is the Leap for SME project, which is totally focused on small, medium-sized enterprises, and we are happily concluding in 6 or 7 months. Please go to the next slide, Sophia. After a very quick introduction, and before getting into the real contents of this workshop, I give you some rules. It's due. During our webinar, please consider that the session is being recorded. The video and the authorized speaker presentations will be made available in our channels, website, YouTube, and social media. In case you don't wish that you are recorded, please turn off your camera right now so you can attend at your best convenience the meeting. But if you don't want to be recorded, just turn off the camera. The microphone is muted by default because we are now quite a lot of people, and otherwise it would be probably a little bit messy. Don't forget to post your questions via chat or Q&A, addressing them to a speaker or to the panel. I start with a sorry, we cannot probably take on board all the questions simply because matters of time, but we will try to make some common patterns among the different questions, or in any case, we will consider them for next possible meetings. After this, I will see you in probably 10 minutes, and I'm very happy to give the floor to Nelson Lash, which is the president of ADENE, Portugal, the president of the board of directors, Portugal, but even more important for us is the current president of the EnR network for this year, starting from February 2022 and ending in March 2023, before the baton passes to the EnR German Energy Agency. So, Nelson, please, the floor is yours, and thank you again for your initial contribution.
Thank you, and good morning, Enrico, from ENEA, and of course, as it's in the program, chair of the working group on industry and enterprises. Good morning to all the panelists, participants, colleagues from EnR and ADENE, and also welcome to all to this, as it was already said, to this EnR Decarbonizing Industry webinar conference, whatever, it's a moment of reflection. Thank you, Enrico, for the intro about EnR. And now going straight to our topic of today. Industry decarbonization is perhaps, we may say, perhaps the most critical objective for 2050 carbon neutrality targets in Europe, as industry together, as you all know, represents over 25% of final energy consumption. European industries are pioneering in their projects, and we know that there are still some untapped opportunities for energy savings and also for innovation. During the 2021 presidency of the European Energy Network, our colleagues in France at ADEME carried out a comparative study on the role of the EnR agencies in implementation of public policies to decarbonize the industry and identify the main lessons learned, namely that the economic, the technical, organizational, and also the behavioral challenges for industry decarbonization have to overcome with transnational collaboration and implementation of best practice developed for economic incentives, awareness, raising skills development, and regulatory measures. This is a study that is that you can check it online. It's in our webpage. So we have all the studies there, so you can easily go there and see all about this study. The support that EnR energy agencies provide for decarbonizations of industry in recovery plans, namely in bolstering hydrogen projects to replace fossil fuels, addressing challenges and also levers linked to electrification industries, has been proving instrumental, really instrumental, and there are really exemplary projects with high potential for replication. We invite you all to read and to share, as I said before, this study and all the other studies, of course, but you can read and share this specific study that's available on our website, and as I said, on our publication section area. So Europe really needs to remain competitive, but it cannot sacrifice the environmental and climate targets, as we all know. And this principle underlies the new industrial strategy presented in March 2020 that says a greener, more circular, and more digital, competitive European at the global stage. These last 3 years presented perhaps the most complex challenge in modern history, devastating effects of no longer deniable climate emergency, a global pandemic with an almost complete shutdown of certain parts of most of the economies, and now in the last year, a war in Europe. The industrial sectors and policymakers had to stop. They had to stop, really stop. They had to rethink. They had to replan. They had to adapt. It was a really more challenging and atypical situation. And overall, industry was able to adapt and to increase incorporation of really relevant technological advances. We had more digitalization, increasing electrification and deployment of hydrogen projects and other technological advances. But now it's critical that Europe scales up its manufacturing capacity for the net zero technologies, and the new Green Deal industrial plan for the net zero age just published will really contribute for a more supportive environment to do this, and to do this that is really necessary. Our mindset has to be focused, and to be focused on energy saving. This is something that we have to take and deal now. We have to be focused on energy saving to end our dependency on fossil fuels. So energy efficiency has to take center stage. 100% clean energy is an important target, but growing needs mean we will not be able to meet our decarbonization targets if we do not really reduce our demand, if we do not reduce our demand for the same end product. And working together, we will be more effective in this dual objective. For one side, efficiency, and for the other side, clean energy. This network, the European Energy Network, has been working on the industry sector for years through a dedicated working group that comprises 38 experts from 21 organizations. It's not something small, it's something big and important. And organization mainly European National Energy Agency, but of course also working with other entities, other organizations, but mainly 21 organizations. This EnR working group on industry and enterprises focus on small and medium enterprises and larger industry, and aims to basically to develop practical actions to promote the reductions of energy use in this energy sector. Just to give you one example of collaboration that came as a result of the working group is the Leap for SME project. This project involves 9 EnR member agencies and has been the core work of the group in the past years. This project aims at supporting member states in establishing or improving effective policies for small and medium-sized enterprises to undergo energy audits and implement cost-effective recommended energy-saving measures. So just to finish, the participants and colleagues, may say that the current energy scenario that we are living is, as I said before, it's very, very challenging for us all, and in particular for the industry sector when it comes to promoting industrial decarbonization. This session will help us envision how to landscape in changing and how we can better support our industry to overcome challenges and at the end succeed. That's what we want, to overcome challenge and to succeed in our mission as agencies, as countries, and of course as citizens. So I really hope that this session is very fruitful for us all, and I'm really eager to see the results of all this debate. Thank you very much, and I'll pass the floor to you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelson. Thanks a lot for this very thorough introduction, which makes my presentation or my life much easier because you say this. No, it's it's perfect. We didn't talk each other, and several things that you say are also here right now. Yes, I probably introduced myself. I'm Enrico Biele, National Energy Agency of Italy, and I'm chairing the EnR Industry and Enterprises Working Group of the EnR. If you can go, please, to the next slide, Sophia. See the slide. Here it is. Wonderful. General context to start to understand where we are now and why this workshop today. On left here, what happened since several years and what's still happening. The industry sector is one of the largest energy consumers in the EU, and as Nelson mentioned, about 1/4 of the consumption are from the industry sector. European industries have made lots of progresses to improve the energy efficiency and switch to low carbon energy sources. But however, and this is from several years, not just a recent comment, there are still opportunities for saving energy in most enterprises and in this sector. Many things have been already done, like in heat recovery or easy and cost-cutting solutions like motor drives, more efficient motor drives. These also thanks to incentives and European regulations or directives, but there are always still occasions and opportunities to improve. This is the usual since probably 20 or not 20, probably 30 years. If we go on the right, what happened from 2020 to 2023? A little bit of changes, more than a little bit. Lots of changes are happening because in positive and negative, together with the spread and the uptake and the development of technologies, processes, and trends such as digitalization, electrification, the use of hydrogen, the industry and enterprises sector had to deal, like all the other sectors, with important natural, political, and societal changes. All this required to rethink policies, strategies, and approaches. What's here inside is that rethink a policy and rebuild it and apply, implement, and disseminate it requires necessary times. So policies made during crisis or during hard periods not necessarily, not usually turn into effective or good policies. In March 2020, the new industrial strategy outlined how Europe has to become greener, more circular, and more digital while remaining competitive on the global stage. But in March 2020, there was not yet the big COVID issue. So in 2021, almost after 1 year, this industrial strategy was updated by the European Commission. Then, taking stock of the new scenario, which includes not only, unfortunately, the COVID crisis, but also some political changes, unfortunately, the invasion and war which is happening in Ukraine, the new Green Deal industrial plan for the net zero age includes also the concept of competitiveness. More than includes, it strengthens, because competitiveness, as also mentioned before by Nelson, is one of the pillars of the European Union policy and strategy, not only for energy, but much more for growth and competitiveness itself. So, together with the other usual drivers and usual patterns, now we have also to be careful to the competitiveness point. What happens in all of these usual business as usual, plus new technologies, processes, and trends, plus the societal, natural, and political changes? It happens, at least a good thing, that a common factor to all of that is that energy efficiency remains the basis of all of these different policies. Not only energy policies with dedicated directives, like the Energy Efficiency Directive has the first one, which is now ongoing its update. Now there is the trilogue where the European Commission, Council, and Parliament are discussing on how to finalize this interesting directive, but also other directorates in the European Commission are working in things which are related to industry and enterprises. First one that comes to my mind is the DG Growth, for example, but not only. There are also the environmental issues which are tackled by other DGs. And if we enlarge the spectrum to the cooperation, we have also other parts of the European Commission and member states which are working on that. So a very complex thing if we just stick to energy and industry and enterprises. If we take a broader view and include the concept of sustainability, this complexity still increases. For today, we stick much as possible to the pair energy and industry plus enterprises. With this quite short but big introduction, what are the main aims of our workshop? First, this workshop was a thought for the national energy agencies, officers, researchers, and analysts to update us on what's happening around, because at present energy and the industry are complex topics, and now it's quite rather hard to say we have an expert in energy and industry. Usually not all of us can have time to follow all topics and everything happens round. So again, that's why we sometimes have this kind of meetings, not only among us, but with relevant and reputed external experts, which come and in the time, appropriate time, they mention what has happened in the last year, or what are the trends forecast for the next few years. It's the case of today. Just what's the difference? It's not just closed meeting, but it's open to external participants. So we have here industry stakeholders. So this is for mostly for the first part. We aim to update and inform all the participants, included us, on what's happening around. This first part, what contains trends in the industry international agenda. We have mentioned both Nelson, myself, some of these trends. We mentioned the energy efficiency first, we mentioned the hydrogen, we mentioned the cooperation, we mentioned electrification, digitalization, and so on. We cannot touch all of them today. We try to focus on some of them which could be the most interesting, but also the most complex ones. And that's why we asked to the best, probably in the field, not probably, I say the best in the fields, to take on board, to take today what they know and what they can share with us about these topics. The first intervention will be on energy efficiency in industry, and it will be held by the International Energy Agency. My colleague later will introduce properly the two speakers. We have two speakers, Emma Mooney and Ugo Salamanca. And then we will move from energy efficiency in industry to hydrogen in energy decarbonization scenarios with a focus on industry. This intervention is made by Jose Moya from the Joint Research Center, which is the scientific arm of the European Commission for Scientific Science and Technology aspects. And we will move then to Elliot Murray from the French National Energy Agency. Elliot will take examples from what's happening in France from the point of view of policy implementation of industrial decarbonization. Plus, he will give us an overview and insights on the activity that the past presidency ADEME made within the industry sector in the EnR. So we will have energy efficiency, then hydrogen, then policy implementation from the practical point of view. You may see something unusual, presentations quite long, 1 hour for 3 or 4 speakers. So what we are doing, usually this happened maybe 15 years ago to have 17 minutes presentations. Now this time is always reducing to 10, 8, sometimes 5 minutes. We just forget all of this today. We're just going back 15 years because maybe for these topics is time to take some proper space and of course listen to what the real experts have to say. So not more to say about this, just to enjoy this first session, which presentations will be shared and will give us lots of insights also for our further work. After this, we will pass to the roundtable on supporting industry and businesses with challenges for 2023 and beyond. I will go more in depth about this when I come back to you to happily moderate this session. We have 5 relevant speakers taking their point of view from different organizations, working groups, or networks. There are 5 speakers. They will bring 4 different point of views, 4 perspectives: financing energy efficiency, more in general, technology, finance, and energy efficiency in industry. Then we have 2 national energy agencies, Bulgaria and Germany, which for different reasons, which I will explain a little bit more later, will tackle these topics from different angles, from a policy implementation point of view and from a project implementation point of view. And then we have Roberta Bonetti from the network EnR to have a broader vision of what's happening on the other side of the Mediterranean area. We have closing remarks. We discussed with the colleagues from the International Energy Agency because at the end, it was probably the best to let them, let Hugo, and have a final conclusion on a specific topic to try to find a role on what was the past of energy efficiency, what's the present, why we are doing energy efficiency in a hurry according to what's happening around, and if possible, what are the little trends for the future. So we will have in 5 or 10 minutes the history of energy efficiency trends, and I'm looking forward also to these closing remarks. I have said what I need to say, so now we can start listening to the International Energy Agency, and the other experts. And I will give the floor to my colleagues, Ana Cardoso and Paulo Colau from the Industry and Enterprises Working Group, and from the Portuguese National Energy Agency. Paulo is the head of industry, and Ana is the relevant project manager in the project department, also involved in it for me, both of them, which will coordinate this first part. Thank you, Ana and Paulo, and welcome to all the speakers.
Thank you very much, Enrico. Good morning. My name is Ana Cardoso, and I'm a member of the EnR Industry and Enterprises Working Group from ADENE, the Portuguese Energy Agency. So together with my colleague, Paulo Colau, the head of our industry unit, will be introducing the speakers for this next panel. So first of all, I would like to welcome our speakers and thank them again for speaking at this webinar. Please remember to ask your questions in the chat, and of course, if time allows, we'll open the discussion after the speaker's presentation. So starting our panel, our first speakers are Hugo Salamanca and Emma Mooney, energy analysts at the International Energy Agency. They will bring us highlights from the EEA Energy Efficiency Report 2022. So Hugo Salamanca managed EEA's Energy Efficiency in Emerging Economies program of work on industrial energy efficiency, so a long sentence. And Emma Mooney from the Energy Efficient Division at EEA's has over 20 years of experience in sustainable energy with a focus on industrial energy use. So Hugo, Emma, the floor is now yours. You may start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to try sharing my screen. The presentation. Right. And here we go. Can you all see my screen? Yes. Okay, great. Well, thanks very much for inviting us to talk at this. What we're going to do is I will talk first of all about the energy efficiency report from 2022, and then Hugo is going to talk about the interesting stuff like the policies and the policy packages and case studies. For those of you that don't know, the Energy Efficiency 2022 is an overview of recent trends in the energy efficiency market. But this year, we've also looked at the role of the energy efficiency in addressing the energy crisis, and we have a special focus on the ASEAN chapter, or on the ASEAN countries. I'm going to show a good few charts, so they're all available within the report. So if I go through too quickly through it, or if you don't catch it, everything is available in the actual energy report itself. It'll be no surprise that this year's energy efficiency report is framed by the current crisis. The energy price and supply chain pressures that were already brewing in 2021 were amplified by 2022 Russia's invasion of the Ukraine and subsequent actions and disruptions to the energy and broader energy markets. Energy efficiency was elevated to the centre of policy agendas as governments and citizens around the world looked to urgently save energy, secure supply, and reduce energy bills. And from this crisis, really, the first message from our report was that we were seeing strong signs of governments turning to energy efficiency, as they did in the 1970s, to simultaneously meet sustainability, security, and climate goals. Something that we track very closely are changes in energy demand, which are the main drivers of energy intensity progress. Energy demand was slower generally after the COVID recovery year. We saw a contraction of 4% in 2020, followed by a rebound of 5% in 2021. This compares with a longer term growth of about 1.3 to 1.7% over the last decade. If you look at the industrial side section, which is the second part of this here, though, you'll see that industry bucked the trend in that it held steady in 2020 and then experienced one of the strongest years of growth in recent times in 2021. We were tracking energy use in energy demand in 2022, and initial data shows that it's moderating and that we expect it to come in at around 1% in 2022 for customers as markets are impacted by high energy prices and supply chain pressures. So I suppose what we're looking for is, are we seeing emerging signs of a turning point for energy efficiency in 2022? We use To measure our energy efficiency at an economy-wide level, we use energy intensity, so the total amount of energy needed to produce 1 unit of GDP. Given the economic background we were just talking about, it won't be any surprise to see that we're expected to perform strongly in 2022, a 2% growth in energy demand, and that's almost 4 times the rate achieved over the last 2 years. But this comes as a result after 5 years of improvements only averaging at around 1%, and is very far off the 4.2% annual improvement that we need to reach the IEA net zero scenario. So that brings us kind of to the central point of what we were trying to explore in the 2022 Energy Efficiency Report. Is 2022 likely to be a turning point for energy efficiency as it was in the 1970s? Efficiency has a key role in delivering energy security, as you all know. So what we were doing here is we were looking at the impact that energy efficiency is already having. In this chart, you can see that there are forces that are pushing the global energy demand higher through greater economic activity, through increasing population, business activities, but these are generally offset by the moderating force of improved energy efficiency. On balance, the efficiency gains have halved the potential growth in global energy demand over the last 6 years, and we see it taking pressure off the need for greater fossil fuels and for the infrastructure around power stations and energy in general. In IEA countries alone, the efficiency actions taken over the last 20 years resulted in a reduce in energy expenditure of about 15% in 2022. When we look at the CO2, global CO2 emissions, energy efficiency also has a big impact here. Since 2000, there's been upward pressure on CO2 emissions from rising populations and incomes, and these have been moderated, as you can see in this chart, by improvements in energy intensity. In the most recent decade, the effect of efficiency has been even greater, as the rate of energy intensity progress almost doubled in the last 2 decades. When combined with shifts in the carbon intensity of the energy mix, the effect on lowering CO2 has been even greater. The net effect of the changes means that efficiency gains of the last 20 years have halved the potential emissions growth from rising populations and incomes. And without these efficiency improvements, efficiency gains, CO2 emissions would be about 30% higher. When we look more specifically at the industrial side, then we can see that industrial demand, unfortunately, is pushing global energy consumption higher as the intensity slows in this sector. Global industrial intensity experienced strong growth from 2019 to 2021, going up about 4%. This means that the percentage of the global energy demand, which industry accounts for on a global level, has risen from 33% in 2000 to 38% in 2022. 3 heavy industries, so chemicals, steels and cement, account for nearly 60% of that, and most of that has really been in the in emerging and developing economies, cover most of that output. Overall, industry currently accounts for about 1/4 of global energy-related CO2 emissions, and it's not on track to meet the milestones of the net zero emission scenario. If we were to meet the net zero scenario, we'd require energy efficiency in the industrial sector to improve at about 3% per annum, and currently we're only at about 1%, unfortunately. However, what we are seeing is that efficiency is rising faster in the less energy-intensive industries. So in the more energy-intensive industries, which you see at the bottom, the heavy industries, we're seeing that the energy intensity is only growing by 1 to 2% from 2010 to 2022 or to 2020. But in the less energy-intensive manufacturing, the average was about 2% to 4% over the last 2 decades, which is more positive, obviously. And some of the recent trends that we're seeing is that we're seeing that there's an increased engagement in energy management systems, with businesses experiencing higher energy costs. They're turning to energy management systems. Here we look at the ISO 50001, but there was a new standard, ISO 50005, launched in September 2021, I think it was, and that's for smaller industries, and we're interested to see how that will help smaller industries to increase their energy management. And while ISO 50001 is widely used, it's not universal and it's not unique in terms of the energy management. There was a survey carried out in the United States of manufacturing, and about 48% of all manufacturing establishments there were doing some form of energy management activity. While at the same time only 3% were doing the ISO 50001. One thing I found interesting about that survey though was that only 8% had any metering past the point of entry into any sub-metering in their industry, which was a little bit concerning, I thought. Another trend that we're seeing, and we talked about it, or it was mentioned earlier, is the electrification. And globally, heat represents about 2/3 of all energy demand in the industrial sector and about 1/5 of the energy demand across the globe. The electrifying industrial processes offers efficiency gains, first of all, and then directly reducing fossil fuels through that. It can increase the process efficiency, and then it's heightened if you can supply the electricity with low carbon electricity. The other thing that it does is that it offers the potential, especially in developing economies, for new business models because of the increased flexibility in terms of the location, the sizing of plant, and when compared with combustion, with fossil fuel combustion type based processes. We also saw a survey that showed there's potential for rapid electrification of industry in Europe, and this was based on things that could be done quickly, where the technology was already available, where that it could be integrated quickly into the process. And we saw that there was a good demand, or there was a good potential for this here. What's important here, though, is that it's heavily reliant on successful integration of the electrified element into the process. So things like system integration, digitalization, process optimization, looking at the parameters are all extremely important here. So that's my whistle-stop tour of the Energy Efficiency 2022, and I'm going to pass over to my colleague Hugo now to talk about policies, policy packages, and future trends in energy efficiency. Over to you, Hugo.
Thank you, Emma, and good morning to all the colleagues on the call. So the question now that we're also trying to tackle is how to unlock the multiple benefits of energy efficiency, in particular in such times. As Enrico was mentioning it, we are trying to act in a hurry. Nonetheless, we should keep in mind that it's also an opportunity to set the basis for long-lasting policies, as we believe that these are the ones that have brought the most benefits to societies. So the approach that we recommend, this is based on what we think at the IEA has been successful in improving energy efficiency in different places, is to have a packaged approach. So what we have called the policy package approach, which is a combination of regulation, information, and incentive measures. We believe that it's by combining these measures that we will produce the most benefits instead of having one single policy that will try to address all the issues. So how it works, of course, is that regulation will set a minimum standard to be met, so rising the level for energy efficiency. Information measures will allow stakeholders to be oriented or to take adequate decisions. Of course, in our case, the stakeholders are mostly the industry. So this is why we believe that having benchmarking approaches, indicators, so that industries know how they stand compared to international standards, but also national levels, and finally, of course, compared to best available technologies in terms of energy intensity. Finally, the incentives will provide more resources to industry to push energy efficiency levels to higher standards. So again, regulation sets the minimum to be met. Information, orientates the stakeholders, and finally, the incentives will support the changes. One key maybe example around there that I wanted to share with you, if we can go to the next slide, is the Perform, Achieve, and Trade scheme that some of you must know in India, which in its design has all these blocks and illustrates how this can look like. So as you might know, in India, there are specific targets by subsector. So each subsector has a specific target to meet for every cycle. So that means that paper industry will need to make X% of savings by the end of cycle 1, by the end of cycle 2, X%, etc. The ones that so that's the regulation, kind of setting the minimum standards to be met for large energy users in the industry. The incentives block will be that for those exceeding those savings, there will be granted white certificates, allowing them to enter a market and gain even more value from their savings. And finally, the information block is represented by the fact that this cycle, revolves, and there has been many cycles, and they are pursuing this on a regular basis, setting targets for the next 3-4 years every time, two couple of years, having packaged everything. So just to give an illustration on examples to look around, we have, of course, others, and we are always looking for more, case studies to showcase. Going to the next slide, just wanted to share what the benchmarking work looks like. So this is for iron and steel. We see we can calculate, according to available data, we calculate the energy intensity in each of these countries. This was launched for Japan G20 presidency. So we are able to map the intensities of steel production across the G20 countries, not to, of course, point fingers to the bad students, but to allow for data sharing, for best practices to be, shared among countries. We're also trying to push, potential to be identified. So by comparing to best available technologies. So here the intensities in each country is the blue dot, and the best available technology for each of these countries is the orange one. So what would have been the indicator if best available technologies had been applied? Again, this is to identify key potentials, to track progress, and of course, to share best practices across different countries. As this is one of the key things that we need today to tackle climate change is international partnerships. Maybe next slide now, Emma, please. And to end maybe on a more positive note, we have seen, recently some changes that, are encouraging in terms of energy efficiency. Of course, it has come to the front of of many countries' agendas, as energy efficiency is one of the most energy cost-effective options that we have to really gain in resilience. And of course, a very cost-effective option. We have seen that, through sustainable development scenarios, that by investing in energy efficiency in industry, we are actually gaining money. So the ratio is that for $1 invested in electric motor drive system, for instance, we are gaining 7 in energy savings over the lifetime of the equipment. So for $1 that we invest, we're gaining 7 in energy savings, which is unparalleled in terms of investment. So we're really trying to maybe make this link between the investment side and the energy efficiency opportunities. And this is what the work of the IEA has been pushing, showing what technologies are mature today, and what could be the way forward. Of course, I wanted here to extend our help to or support to the colleagues on the call and watching today. We're very much interested in knowing what case studies we can showcase in our work. So please do reach out if there are interesting initiatives going around that we can use for our work. And of course, we're very much happy to support any initiatives from our colleagues to push energy efficiency to higher levels. And on that, I'll thank Enrico again for the invitation and the opportunity to share our work.
Thank you very much, Emma, Hugo, for this very interesting overview. Now I think we can move on to a very hot topic, hydrogen. So we welcome José Moya from the European Commission's Joint Research Center to present hydrogen in energy decarbonization scenarios focused on industry. So José is a project leader at the energy intensive unit industry and the just transition mechanism of the GRC. So he has worked there since 2009 in energy intensive unit industries and also coordinating the GRC support to the coal regions in transition. So thank you very much, José. Please, the floor is now yours. You are muted.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't see the Teams having the maximize the screen. Okay, thank you for the invitation. As you know, the ERC is the Science and Knowledge Service of the European Commission, and our mission is to support EU policies with independent advice through the whole policy cycle. I'm working in the energy transition insights for policy in the Unit C7. And today the title of my presentation is Hydrogen in Energy Decarbonization Scenarios Focused on Industry. So on the next slide, most of the presentation will rely on the results presented in our latest report that was published 2 months ago. That is about the role of hydrogen in energy decarbonization scenarios. However, I'm leading in the ERC the thing about decarbonization of energy intensive industries. And in that topic, we released last year a couple of reports. You have there one about decarbonization technologies for the steel industry. There is a similar one that we released also last year about the cement. And I want to mention a couple of more reports, one about the competitiveness scoreboard, in which we report about where is the situation in some key technologies enabling the decarbonization transition. And the last one that we are using some data here complements very well the information that we are going to share about carbon capture and storage. And there are more similar reports this report belongs to a series that is in the Clean Energy Technology Observatory. And the last but not least, I want to mention also a couple of reports that we produced in energy scenarios. The first one was with the question of the Green Deal, and the second one was for the energy performance, the revision of the energy performance on buildings. So having said that, I will go to the topic of the meeting, that is about the hydrogen. As you know, in the hydrogen is more and more frequently cited in energy scenarios and is part of the energy future. So I think that part of this was triggered by the European Union strategy. And right now, there are 18 G20 members that either have an hydrogen strategy or have the hydrogen strategy in progress. 19 European members have already an hydrogen strategy, and the number of publications in the hydrogen related with hydrogen is booming. Also, I can mention that the accelerating hydrogen is part of the REPowerEU. So having said this, I go directly to the where the hydrogen is consumed right now globally and in the European Union. You see there the global production, the global demand of hydrogen on the left-hand side. That is basically petroleum refining, ammonia, and methanol. The main difference with the consumption in the European Union is that the methanol in the European Union is testimonial 5%, while in the globally is 15%. And the presence that the hydrogen will have, at least in the European Union, is compared to that 8 million tons. The estimation by 2050 is 68 million tons. So it has to grow tremendously, a ninefold increase. So now I'm coming to the findings of the report, that the third report that I mentioned on the introduction. There are similar analyses done for a global level, but I'm going to focus here in this presentation about what happens for the European Union. In the European Union, the energy consumption, you see that in the slide, that in the last 20 years has been relatively stable. There is a clear decreasing trend by 2030 and 2040 and 50, but there is no such an agreement in the intensity of the decrease. Depending on the energy scenarios that we have there, the intensity is different. All in all, we see that by 2030, regarding hydrogen, the presence by 2030 can reach up to 7% of the final energy demand, and by 2050, until up to 20%, practically 20% of the final energy demand. For industry, there are again, the scenarios foresee. Well, here you see that the historical trend has been clearly decreasing in the last 20 years. And again, there is no agreement in how much can be the hydrogen demand by 2030, 40, and 50. So regarding industry, the share by 2030, the highest value is 2%, and by 2050, 35% of the final energy demand. There are more things that I think that are worth mentioning here is that fossil fuels pass of being around 50% by 2019 to 12% on average, including also in these 20% the use of fossil with CCS. That is why I think that it's worth mentioning the CCS. The electrification rate passes from the current value up to 50%. Yeah, in the Fit for 55, the value is 60%. Regarding the hydrogen, on average, by 2050 is around 8 million tons of average, and the maximum value is delivered by the Fit for 55, that it considers 60 million tons of hydrogen only in industry. So the hydrogen in power generations, all scenarios foresee an increase in power generation, basically based on wind and solar. However, the hydrogen in power generation is limited in only very few scenarios. And I think that this is relevant because it can be a relevant role allowing the integration of renewable energy. So one of the conclusions of the report is the amount of electrolyzers that will be required to satisfy the hydrogen demand. We see there that depending on the presence of wind and solar, in order to satisfy the total energy demand that they devoted to hydrogen, the total capacity will be by 2030 on average from 2060 to 300 in an average demand scenario, and the maximum value goes from 500 to 550. In the two lower panels, you see the same values for an average scenario and the average demand of the scenario of hydrogen by 2050 and the maximum. And the values that you see there are really remarkable. On average, from 700 to 800 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity. By 2050, the value goes from 1,200 and 1,400 gigawatts by 2050. So these are very remarkable amounts, and that will strain the capacities because, there is, for example, there are currently 300 megawatts of electrolyzer capacity installed globally. So we are now talking about hundreds and thousands of gigawatts. So that will, we need to start doing this conversion. The strategy already, the European strategy already established a goal of having 1 gigawatt installed by renewable hydrogen by 2024, and I think that we are already late achieving that goal. Okay, for the industry, I pass to the second report that we have about industry. We see that the industry is considering global targets about decarbonizations, and the problem is that there are not the remaining 15 largest steel makers don't have such goals. So for the European Union, there is a clear trend in the European steel makers to start using hydrogen to reduce the iron, and there are the two largest European producers are also considering CCUS. The CCUS is not disregarded for the industry. The main factors affecting the deployment, well, the technologies that will win, of course, that it will be the cost. Here you see the results for 5 technologies according to different studies. What is the production cost using those technologies compared to current production cost? So for hydrogen, for reduced iron with hydrogen, you see that even BNEF even foresees a production cost lower than the current production cost. However, the variability range in the different studies is really very broad. So I want to say that this change will require a very substantial investments in the industry. Just as we are talking about hydrogen needs in order to to transport the 90 million tons of steel produced by the integrated route, we will need 5 million tons of renewable hydrogen. So I want also to mention the CCS because this is an option. It's not only for the steel, for some other industries like the cement, there is no other option to get rid of the process emissions. The steel industry has the option of using CCS or getting rid of the main of the coke used as a reductant, that is the main source of CO2 emissions. So here you see a map of possible viable repositories, possible CO2 areas in which this can be stored, combined with where the production of the steel integrated route is. Nevertheless, this using the CCUS, we will not get rid of the totality of the CO2 emitted in the industry. And also the CCU projects needs to take into account the full life of the project, because, for example, you saw in the European Union, methanol is not the main use of hydrogen. So we are not very competitive producing methanol, and there I think that there is a little business case to defend starting using CCUS in the steel to produce methanol when the producing it from steam cracking or fossil fuels is not competitive in Europe. So these kind of considerations are taking place when considering these kind of projects. However, there is of these kind of projects, research projects, currently in the European Union. So the main messages of this presentation is that currently the main consumption is in feedstock, but of course that the introduction of hydrogen in the economy will have to take part of the final energy demand. So for the industry, in the final energy demand is only based on replacing fossil fuels by supplying high temperature heat. But the easy way will be decarbonizing the use of fossil fuels, well, the use of fossil fuels, decarbonizing the feedstock content in the industry that is right now. Yeah, that can be a catalyzer for introducing hydrogen in the industry. In the study about the electrolysis in the energy scenarios, we put there the numbers of what is the electrolysis capacity required, and that will put an stress in in current production capacities. I said that currently there are 300 megawatts of global installed electrolyzer capacity. 40% of that capacity is installed in the European Union. And in the third report that I mentioned in the second slide, I think, mentions that the current production capacity of electrolyzers is 1 gigawatt, so an annual capacity of 1 gigawatt. So in order to achieve the values that you see there is not only the need to deploy renewables like crazy, but also to increase the electrolyzer capacities. So regarding the industry, this is a must to decarbonize the industry in the European Union is in the law, and we are running out of time because the industry have a long times for the lifespan is very long. Goes from 20 years in the steel industry to more than 40 in the cement, and we are just only one investment cycle away from 2050. So investment decisions made right now and in the few coming years can create stranded assets for the industry. And this transformation is not easy because it will require very, very big investments in the industry. Yeah, also I want to say again that also for the steel industry, CCU it will be challenging. For other industry. There is no other option, so it cannot be disregarded in general for any industry. Yeah, that is from. Thank you very much for the attention, and I'm looking forward to having the following exchange.
Thank you, Jose, for the state of the art regarding hydrogen and what you can expect in the future. So we'll now move on to our last presentation for this panel. Our ENR colleague, Elliot Marie, that will talk about the role of the national energy agencies in the process of industrial decarbonization. So Elliot is a project manager at ADEME, the French Agency for Ecological Transition, and he develops sectoral and technological analysis to produce long-term decarbonization scenarios for the French heavy industries. So welcome, Elliot. You have the screen.
Is it okay? Can you see it?
Yes, you only need to go to the presentation mode.
Yeah, like this?
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the invitation. As introduced, I'm going to be doing a presentation on the role of national energy agencies in the process of industrial decarbonization. A quick word of introduction. I'm going to be presenting three main different topics today. The first one is some highlights from the previously mentioned study that was commissioned by ADEME and released late 2021. So the exact title is A Comparative Study of the Roles Played by Renewable Energy Network Agencies in the Implementation of Public Policies to Decarbonize Industry. Then I'm going to give you an illustration on some of the flagship programs for industry decarbonization in the context of post-COVID France. And then I will open up the presentation on industry road mapping initiatives. So first, this slide shows you how important the industry sector is in national greenhouse gas emissions. As you can see, for most members of the network, industry represents between 30 and 40% of the national GHG emissions, with an average value of about 30%. So this is a fairly significant sector to decarbonize, to reach neutrality for all the network members. Industry is also, quite interestingly, a sector that has greatly benefited from the recovery plans following the COVID crisis. So about 38 billion euros from the Next Generation EU budget has been allocated to industry decarbonization to country members. So actually, only a limited fraction of this budget was directly flagged as industry decarbonization. So that's that's represented in the red area on the graph. Most of the budget was actually related to industry decarbonization, but was allocated in the form of cross-sectoral measures for renewables in industry, for instance, and for hydrogen and CCS project in industry. So this is only EU budget, but there can also be some national funding, and I will touch on that later with the case of France. So as part of the study, about 14 national agencies from the European Energy Network have been surveyed and interviewed, which represent about 60% of the members. Almost all of these agencies have activities in industry decarbonization, with the exception of the UK and Greece, but they could contribute to the study regardless. It is also important to keep in mind that the study actually captures the perception of these agencies that are usually at the frontier between the public and the private sector. So one of the first questions that was asked to these agencies is, what do you identify as the main obstacles to industry decarbonization? So the first answer that came on top was, quite unsurprisingly, the economics. Most of the time, switching to more low carbon industrial processes is capex intensive, and financial returns are rather unclear. Oops, I'm sorry about that. The other obstacles I feel are a bit less commonly discussed. For instance, behavioral obstacles include the lack simply include the lack of awareness for change in industry, where economic rationales are still largely dominant. Some members would talk about routines in industry. There's also lack of clear, accessible information regarding industry decarbonization, and this is especially a problem for SMEs, small and medium enterprises. There's some technological issues still to be solved, and where there's also lack of know-how and skilled workforce to implement industry decarbonization project. And again, this is especially true for small and medium enterprises. The good news is that these obstacles can actually be at least partly addressed by energy agencies. So, following the first questions, agencies were asked what were the most important drivers for them to overcome these obstacles, and the three main drivers that were identified are firstly the economic incentive schemes. So that is something that is historically part of the portfolio of activities of energy agencies. R&D support programs, but also what is being called external pressure. So that can include pressures from shareholders, investors. It could be pressure from civil society or directly customers. So that is not necessarily to say that energy agencies are all competent to leverage all these drivers, but at least these are the main drivers that have to be addressed at some point. Energy agencies use a range of instruments in their activity to promote industry decarbonization. So most of these agencies actually operate economic incentive schemes. So that's what we can see on the graph, and I will shortly thereafter give you an illustration. That is simply public subsidies to unlock investments in industry decarbonization. Also, most of the agencies have activities to disseminate information and communication programs on industry decarbonization. So, for instance, there are ongoing public-private partnerships. There are you could have some trainings for energy auditing, for instance. And I could also think of a program where best practices in industry would be awarded with a prize, to promote these practices. And all of these kinds of activities fall under the information and communication measures. Now I'm going to give you a short illustration of some of the flagship programs, economic programs for industry decarbonization that we've had in the post-COVID France. So the first one I would like to mention is what we call the Industry Decarbonization Fund, which was funded by the French Recovery Plan, France Relance, for the period 2020 to 2022. So like any recovery plan, the purpose was to stimulate the economy in some very strategic area, including industry and decarbonization, for a post-COVID recovery. And here's a short summary of the fund. So to date, more than 230 projects have been selected. About 1 billion euros worth of capex aid have been granted to the industry, which represents a rate of public support of about 25%. 327 million euros of OPEX aid have been allocated for low carbon heat projects, and that represents accumulated that represents 4.5 million tons of CO2 equivalents worth of GHG emissions avoided, which is in the order of 5 to 6% of national industry-related emissions at constant production level. So that was an important mention because some of these projects include an increase in production level. So that is assuming constant production level. The next program I'd like to mention is the France 2030 Investment Plan for Industry, which is a bit more recent. And the envelope, the budget is also much higher for the covering a 4-year period starting in 2022. The purpose here is a bit different. It's to align industry GHG emissions with the minus 55% target by 2030, and then to align the industry with neutrality by 2050. To give you a short overview of the strategy, the idea is to allocate out of these 5.6 billion euros, 1 billion euros would be allocated for mature technologies in the same spirit as the previously mentioned Industry Decarbonization Fund. About 4 billion euros would be allocated for deep decarbonization projects that are directed towards highly intensive emission sectors. So these are cement, steel, aluminum, and chemicals. And 600 million euros for R&D and innovation. And just to give you an illustration of the kind of call for projects, following the war in Ukraine, the Decarb Flash call for projects was launched. It was initially endowed with a budget of 25 million euros. So the spirit at the time was to rapidly reduce fossil fuel consumption on small to medium industrial sites. So the project capex would have to be maximum capex would be rather limited, up to 3 million euros from a list of eligible technologies. Most of these projects are either energy efficiency or electrifications. At this stage, more than 445 projects have been received, which represents accumulated aid demanded of about 100 million euros, which is, as you can see, about 4 times the initial budget. And the selection is still in progress. And regarding the other subsidy schemes, they are under construction to be published, and yet to be published in the coming years. Now I would like to open the presentation on industry road mapping initiatives. So from the study, it was also interesting to notice that following the recovery plan, the post-COVID recovery plan, most of the countries surveyed, more than 50%, have actually issued or updated their industry decarbonization roadmap. So interesting, it's quite interesting. It seems like the 2020 pandemic has really triggered something regarding long-term industry planning, at least from our perspective. And to give you an example, here are some of the ongoing road mapping initiatives in France. So the first, I would say, overarching framework that we have in the country is a French National Low Carbon Strategy, which is essentially the French NDC. And this one defines a GHG target for the manufacturing industry of minus 81% by 2050. So that's the overarching framework. On top of that, ADEME came with this own initiative, its own project, which is the construction of sectoral transition plan for the 9 most energy-intensive industries in France. The idea is to propose different scenarios to reach neutrality for these most energy-intensive industries. And then following that, the National Industry Council in France, which is essentially a public-private dialogue platform to discuss industry-related policies. The council, at least some of the branches in the council, have published their own roadmap, sectoral roadmap, to share their own vision of neutrality and their commitments, the commitments of the industry. And then a bit more recently, the government announced, in the context of the France 2030 program, the government announced that it will ask the 50 most emission-intensive industrial sites in France to produce their own decarbonization roadmap, which is confidential at this stage, up to 2050. So that's with the idea of long-term to manage long-term decarbonization and to planning. So there's probably way too much initiatives out there in France, but that is also pretty much true at an international level. We notice that there are many different road mapping initiatives, many different methodologies, and different purposes. So the questions that we'd asked ourselves was, can we develop a common basis? So recently, there was a working group that was launched to try to develop a EU standard on industry road mapping methodology. The idea of this working group is to try to answer the question, what could be defined as a good, credible, and ambitious sectoral plan? So since this is a pretty young initiative, the group is actively recruiting. So a little bit of advisement here. If you're interested to join or to get more information, you can get in contact either directly with my colleague Elsa, who's in charge of this program at ADENE, or you can get directly in touch with me if you're interested. So thank you very much for your time, and I think I am done.
Thank you very much, Elliot. Very interesting presentation, and indeed very interesting ongoing initiatives that you presented. So I'll now pass the floor to my colleague Paulo to moderate some questions. Paulo, the floor is yours now.
Okay, are you listening to me? Good morning, everybody. We now open the question from the audience. We have some questions in the chat, and also we have some questions, the same question and others in the PNR or Q&A. And so I'll try to manage this in order to direct the questions and probably some of the answers that are already in the chat. Okay, so let me see, because I think that Jose Moya answered Carlos already, but nevertheless I'll try to go on. So we have 3 questions to Jose, and the first one from Carlos. I think that Jose, you already answered here, didn't you? But nevertheless, so if you can.
Yeah, we concluded the report. The question was whether the Estonian strategy was included in the 19 in the number of 19 EU countries with a strategy. We concluded the report last year by the end of December. So the strategy was adopted. The Estonian one was adopted in March. It was not included. So right now the number will be 20.
Okay, thank you. Then we have another question from, I hope that I spell it okay, from Vedran Kristolovic to Jose. Would
His
policies...
mic is enabled if Vedran wants to come in and ask the question.
Okay, Vedran, do you want to use the mic?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Okay.
So once again, thanks for great presentations. I was interested regarding the most energy-intensive industries that are targeted here to be supported by switch to hydrogen. Would then European policies support such measures by making difference between which products are actually using this decarbonization through hydrogen and those that are produced conventionally? So would there be some taxing policies or any of that kind?
I think that the main climate policy is the ETS. The ETS right now has a provision about carbon leakage that says that grants free allowances at the level of the benchmarking value. That will be removed once that the CBAM is introduced. The CBAM stands for Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism that will make importers in the European Union of the products produced and covered by the ETS pay the same carbon cost as if the products were produced in Europe. So right now, the industry is protected and is prevented from moving away from the production from Europe to other countries in which they don't have those carbon costs by the carbon leakage provision that they would. But once that the CBAM is in place, that carbon leakage provision will be phased out. So the European producers will pay the full cost of the carbon emissions. So I think that having the full cost of the carbon emissions, you will see a much higher interest to use decarbonizing technologies, among them CCS or hydrogen. There is no preference in one or the other.
Thank
but
you.
also by the CBAN, I think that we saw the problem of, let's say, we level a little bit the playing field, that the importers in the European Union will be under the same carbon cost as within the European Union.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
We all thank you very much. We also have a question from Marina Sanqueiro. Marina, will you like to use the micro to pose the question? So I will read it. How does all the improvement process with the primary industries outsourced to Asia? Are we expecting all primary industries to come back to Europe? Meaning, how coordinated are we with Asia on this pursuit?
I will say that the main, if they have any advantage of moving away, the CBAN will solve part of that advantages. So because all imports into the European Union will have the same cost anywhere. So why to move the industry, the primary industry away when there is no competitive advantage competing within Europe?
Marina, is it okay? So I'll go.
She has a second question, meaning how coordinated are we with Asia on this pursuit? Okay, Asia, if they have a competitive advantage, they will pursue it. The problem is that the CBAN will not be, Europe will not be alone. I guess that in few years, other regions will adopt similar mechanisms. If they are fighting climate change with similar to policies to DTS, the CBAN will recognize that in the price paid at the border, but also there will not, how coordinated are we? I think that we are setting an example that others will follow suit.
Okay, thank you. So finally, I'll pick this question to Emma. What's the name of the new ISO which was introduced in 2021 besides the 50,001? Emma.
It's I'm not sure of the long name off the top of my head now, but it's 50,005. And it's really just started. We have no data on it yet on how it's doing. There are a number of other countries like Canada, which have an ISO 50,001 ready, I think they call it. But it's a 50,005.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll go to the next panel in order to keep on track on the time. So now, on behalf of the European Energy Network and of the Portuguese Energy Agency that presides over the network until the end of this month, we thank all our speakers so far. We will now move to the second panel, a roundtable on supporting industry and businesses, challenges for 2023 and beyond, moderated by Enrico from EnR, the Italian Energy Agency and chair of the EnR Industry and Enterprises. Enrico, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Paolo and Anna. Thank you to all of you for joining. And now we are moving to this, we call it roundtable, or more probably a discussion on supporting businesses and enterprises.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. I'm glad to be here, and the Task Force on Industrial Energy Efficiency at UNECE was actually put together to facilitate companies, but also member states of our 56 member countries, so that's the entire Northern Hemisphere, to expedite the journey of decarbonizing industry. It has been on energy efficiency in the beginning, but with the current circumstances, the area of attention grew tremendously, not only to incorporate the notion of decarbonization, but also more and more so resilience. And for that, we did quite a lot of quite a lot of work in different areas on assessing the situation, where are the gaps, where are the commonalities, and where do we need to act, and that we do not want to replicate, but fill in the niches and connect the dots between existing functions and groups. So therefore, I'm really glad that we can be here together. And I also saw many familiar faces to facilitate my responses that I'm going to share with you later. I just run through a few basic concepts, and that is the role of the industrial sector. It is much more important that many people are aware of, people that are not normally dealing with the industrial sector, not only to GDP and employment, but also to be able to decarbonize. It's way underestimated what the role and also the difficulties of SMEs are. So we see that is data on Europe, that by far most of them are micro and small companies with different challenges that they're faced with, as we have heard before. And there is a couple of types of interventions that can be taken, so be them reduction or substitution or compensation. However, they are all ups and downs, and naturally the impulse is the easy way, that is let's go for renewable or go for hydrogen. However, the issue is that there is not enough. So if you look at EU 27, we have 34% of renewable electricity available, and industry takes up 36. If we look at heat or energy as a total, it's 20 versus 26. So just doing a fuel switch doesn't work. Now, some data that we gathered in one of the countries suggests that industry is willing to do something. However, in order to be able to do that, we need much, much more energy. And that means we will need to emphasize that if we really want to achieve resilience, we need to look beyond renewable electricity, and we need to work towards hydrogen and a fuel switch, of course. But in the short run, to increase the resilience, it's absolutely crucial to speed up the planning processes, whilst at the same time looking for energy waste, for what can I do on site, how can I help myself as much as possible. And there are tons of different measures on how that can be done. But as was said beforehand, we need to really work particularly on the smaller companies. And we just established yesterday that the most energy intensive company size category in each case is the medium-sized companies together with the small companies. And that is of importance, this whole education aspect, as those areas that would help us most to create resilience and reduce and increase decarbonization would be using waste heat potentials and flexibilizing our demand. But those are the areas that most companies haven't really looked at sufficiently enough, particularly the smaller ones. And therefore, I just stop sharing this. And therefore, it's important to get every company on board to really become resilient. So that's every company in the country. Otherwise, we will never, or in the region, otherwise it will never be possible to truly reach net zero. But also, a company can only reach really net zero if it facilitates or if it manages to get every staff member on board as well. So that is what we need to achieve and work for in terms of really achieving net zero. And one of the crucial elements here is, how do I compose the mix? A mix that is working over time. We need to abandon the old economic viability calculations for single measures. We need to have a systematic approach that looks at the decarbonization target year, that looks at the notion of resilience, and composes a mix that takes into consideration external factors such as emission costs, such as scarcity, to really become prepared for the future. So much for the general description from my side.
Thank you, sir. Please, Rod, since Stephanie introduced already some concepts of
Great, thank you very much.
barriers. You please go on.
Yes, I'm Rod Jansen, President of Energy Efficiency and Industrial Processes, which is a not-for-profit based in Brussels. But I'm also, as it's listed there, the chairman of the working group on industry for EFIG, Energy Efficiency Financial Institutions Group. We came out with our report last year. I've just put the report link into the chat for those who haven't seen it already. The thing is that what's important about it is that it looks at what best practice has gone on. We had a series of 6 meetings. We come up with conclusions and recommendations for EU institutions, whether it's Parliament, whether it's the Commission, whether it's for member states, whether it's for financial institutions. The important thing about EFIG was that we started it in about 2013. 2 things are important for us. One is that banks didn't understand what an energy efficiency measure was, to try to put a boundary around it. They knew what investing in a wind turbine was. You know what a wind turbine is, but in terms of an energy efficiency measure on a plant floor, it was much harder for them to understand. Also, the other thing was that we've made so much progress because the Commission didn't even want us to do industry. They only wanted to do buildings. And we just had Stefan. Stefan and I were the big pushers throughout that whole process to make sure that it came through. So this last phase, this is now the 3rd phase of EFIG, which is going to end in June. The industry working group was really important, and it came up with a lot. What was important about it was because for the first time, and I've worked in industry for a long time, it's the first time that we've had stakeholders, whether they were people from factory floors, for academics like Stefan, or people from energy agencies, but we also had the financial institutions there as well, for them to understand the barriers that we saw and how much they were part of the problem and how much they were part of the solution. And so, as you mentioned, Enrico, about this new working group, we've got a new working group that's, again, has to finish by June. And it's talking about accelerating consumer demand. We talked about Repower EU. We've talked about Fit for 55. We've got to go faster. We have no choice. And the last working group meeting we had looked at SMEs, looked on both industrial SMEs and non-industrial SMEs to see what can happen. One of the really good points about it is the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland. And I think, to me, that's a model that other countries should be looking at. Our report's going to be coming out in June. The draft has gone to the members right now, but there's a lot that can be done to help engage SMEs and to help industry as a whole. And I mean, Elliot was talking about a lot of the things going on in France, and this is quite encouraging. But Greenflex was also, and they had a program with bankers to actually improve the capacity of bankers in France for them to understand energy efficiency in industry better. And so it's a two-way street with financial. They're not the enemy, they're part of the solution, but we've got to work a lot more with them. And so they have to understand our issues, and for us to understand their situation as well. So it's a two-way street, and I think that's one of the great things about EFIG. EFIG ends in June, but it will be replaced by a new coalition of financial institutions. The full design of it hasn't come out yet. It said in the Repower EU, the Fit for 55 package, that it was going to be high level. EFIG was never high level. It was mid-level. Now they say this new one is going to be high level. So obviously the commissioner and the director general want to take it up another notch, dealing with financial community. But this is what's important, is that we've got to keep industry's voice in this new coalition that's going to go on. Anyway, I'll leave it at that right now.
Oh, very interesting. Keep us informed about how it will be, how it goes, and further developments on this new coalition. And now, since you already, both of you introduced also the link with industry, I'd ask Sveti, please, to introduce SIDA, your activities, and also if you can make a link with your industry activities from the point of view of the policy implementation. And now Rod said it. If you want also to expand a little bit the concept of what we need to, we get to go faster. So if we can do something more in terms of implementation internally to the agencies, feel free to elaborate this point.
Yes,
Thank you.
hello everyone. Hello everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm Tsitomira Kulevska. I'm from Sustainable Energy Development Agency in Bulgaria. This is a government organization. We are an executive agency to the Ministry of Energy in Bulgaria, and our main task is to support the policymakers in development of policies and also in implementation of policies and monitoring of those policies and reporting to the on national level and to the Commission. The agency is also responsible for the analysis of the energy efficiency status quo on national level. And well, we do the evaluations of energy efficiency in bottom-up and top-down methodologies. And by being a policy, a government institution, there is a department in SEDA that is responsible for the control over the energy, the quality of energy audits, and on the qualification of energy auditors. We try to, of course, to support the industrial sector, which is not only has not only obligations, of course, under the energy efficiency law. The obligations are put on the large industries. The SMEs, well, they don't have as much, as many obligations, or even any. But we try, of course, to not only control this implementation, but to support the sector, the industrial sector, in this process. Mostly, if it concerns the large industries, which are the obligated parties under the national legislation. Of course, they are obligated under the Article 8 of the ED to conduct energy audits, but also, well, each 4 years or after major improvements that happen in the enterprise. We try to educate them, let's say, to raise the awareness on the benefits of energy efficiency for their competitiveness and in general for the energy consumption of the enterprises. We try to train them on energy management systems. To recently, I think last year or 2021, we developed a guide for energy management in the industrial sector. We also develop a benchmarking system, which is an online and which is a public one that the enterprises can access and can benchmark their energy consumption, which is the most important for the large industries, let's say, because they have the resources. They don't have the knowledge, let's say, and sometimes it's very important this awareness rising to be provided to them. Concerning the SMEs, the things are different there. SMEs are those who need more resources. So that's, well, in Bulgaria, we have several, let's say, financial policies which are targeted directly, mostly to the SMEs. And those are last year and currently, we count a lot on the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. There are several funds that provide support to the SMEs, which is investment in climate neutrality and digital transformation, growth and innovation, and green transition and circular economy. And the Green Transition and Circular Economy Fund actually is the one which provides direct support, energy efficiency, renewable sources to the SMEs, which is in two directions, let's say grant support, state budget monies, and but also financial instruments, which is also very important. For the energy savings achieved, let's say. The other financial program targeted to the SMEs is the Competitiveness and Innovation Program, which is again aims at energy efficiency, research and innovation, also circular economy transition. They have these instruments, it's more likely a combined instrument, financial instrument with grant support for the SMEs, partially for large industries also. And it's again targeted to energy efficiency measures and certification system for energy management, of course, renewable sources also as a transition to green consumption. So this is the important, let's say, development in the industrial sector, because it's not like it already was had been said. It's not enough to just do a fuel switch. It's need of systematic approach and vision, not only energy efficiency or less, but also all the other waste management, circular economy, and all the systematic view on the industrial sector development. Thank you.
Thank you, Sveti. So similar question for Dietmar, but now since Sveti also mentioned this, please cannot avoid to include the concepts of digitalization and not only energy efficiency and renewables. And if you don't mind, speaking of Germany, you cannot also avoid to say something about the energy management systems and the ISO 15001. I don't want to put you in difficulty, but not all of this was planned. Nothing was planned, basically, just some ideas. So feel free to answer.
Yeah, I might keep myself a bit more brief, but yeah, I tried to tackle all these questions, as you said. Maybe a quick introduction of my side, first of all. My name is Dietmar Gründig, and I'm working for this topic of energy efficiency or climate change in the industry sector since the last 12 years, I think, and 10 years of it in the DENA, the German Energy Agency. And here I'm a head of industry, basically responsible for the industry sector here at DENA. And DENA itself is a bit more different, maybe than to the Bulgarian agency. We are project-based. Basically, we are working on mostly projects given by the Ministry of Economics and Climate Protection, but we also do projects with the private sector, for example, here, as, for example, our study Climate Neutrality of the DENA, which we published in 2021, sorry. So we at DENA, we are right now 500 people, and we are working on all sectors and topics concerning the energy transition in total. But of course, my department, we are focusing on the industry sector. What projects are we doing? We're basically, one main focus is surely the information transportation. This is especially in focus for small and medium-sized enterprises, where we look at pilot projects. We look at information transportation to facilitate basically prepare the market for it, the market preparation, I would say. And here we also do guidelines for energy management systems, for example, about also guidelines for some branches, quite new, for example, also which is coming out in a couple of weeks for the glass industry, for example, where we provide some examples and benchmarks or let's say best practice examples on how to proceed in these specific industries and so on. Other topics are, for example, also our award, the Energy Efficiency Award, where we basically provide a big big prize for very good best practices in industry sectors, and we are also doing in other projects a more research approach on how to help small and medium-sized enterprises to get more efficiency. Here, the topic of digitalization becomes much more important. We are currently, for example, working on a project which we try to create a cloud-based solution for 12 to 13 companies looking specifically at cooling systems. And with this cloud-based solution, we hope to get benchmarks and make a big rollout then, not only for this 12, but also, let's say, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 companies that can participate in this cloud solution to get a better idea about their cooling system and also get some hints on energy efficiency measures that can take place. So these are some examples on projects. Last but not least, we also, of course, advise the Federal Ministry of Economics and Climate Protection in preparing their founding programs. Such as the federal programs, for example, for energy and resource efficiency in economics that's currently in place. Here we also help basically in changing that or making it more adaptable for the small and medium-sized enterprises. And so that's basically what we are at ADENE doing. But what I see, what is right now really a problem, or how, if you ask me the question on how you can support small and medium-sized enterprises in getting more efficient, I think the main topic is these companies, as I've heard, they just don't have the time currently or the human resources to tackle this topic. This is a major problem. So shortage of skilled workers is something we need to get more into detail. This is really essential. And we also have good founding programs. I think if you're looking at this federal program for energy and resource efficiency, which we currently run, you get quite big subsidies. You can argue maybe this is a bit too low. You can maybe increase the money here. I think that's always good, and I think I would also argue in that direction. But also the approval procedures, and also make it easier for application. That's something small and medium-sized enterprises really also are a problem. They don't merely make their decision on investments based on these founding programs. They make it out of other reasons, and the founding program is something which is nice to have, but not in the focus. I think that the situation changed a bit in the last half year, I'd say, or since the war in Ukraine. This topic becomes much more in the focus, but it's because of the rising energy prices that they are really looking at the energy efficiency measures. But here I think we need to address them more properly, to facilitate them the application form, to make it not more easier for them to get access to this money and to this founding program. This is basically what I would say at the moment. There are some other aspects, but I think I keep it to that for the first time, and okay. Pass on to the next one.
Thank you, Dieter. Now we move to EnR with Roberta. Please, of course, introduce EnR, and if you can also maybe connect your work in the National Energy Agency's work with the concept of cooperation and activities you are maybe doing in finance and within the concept of industry and businesses. Thanks, Roberta.
Thank you, Enrico, and thank you for having me here representing EnR. As Enrico said, I'm working at ENEA, but in Brussels, but I'm Secretary General of EnR. EnR is the Mediterranean Association of National Energy Agencies for Energy Management, and it brings together 13 national energy agencies, both from the northern and the southern shores of the Mediterranean. Many of the Northern Shore members are also, or let's say all of our members are also members of the EnR, by the way, and the other shore is represented by Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, and Syria. That's not active at the moment due to, of course, political reasons. EnR was established in 1997 and has always facilitated the sharing of experiences, know-how, best practices among the partners, and through also bilateral, multilateral cooperation, transfers of skills, methods, technologies, and the design and implementation of energy management policies in the members' countries. Many of the agencies of the southern countries have been established thanks to MEDENER. Since 2018, MEDENER coordinates the MeetMed project, that's mitigation enabling energy transition in the Mediterranean region. And our main partner is RECRE. That's the center, the regional center based in Cairo for renewable energy and energy efficiency. And they represent the League of Arab States, so 17 countries, and among them all of the MEDENER countries. So we work together in close cooperation. We also participate in the work carried out in the framework of the Union for Mediterranean, and in particular in the energy platforms, together with the regulators of the Mediterranean region and the transmission system operators of the Mediterranean region. Why the cooperation? So the main challenge is to mitigate the climate risk in our region and to use the Mediterranean resources. The Mediterranean countries are responsible for 6% of the world's CO2 emissions, but the region is warming faster than all the others in the world, is warming 20% faster than the rest of the world. So there's high vulnerability of the region to climate change and environmental degradation. There are many problems also stressed at the level of hydric resources, and there are implications also on agriculture. So the Mediterranean population and the GDP will increase mainly in the southern countries by 2050. And of course, energy demand and CO2 emissions will increase as well, and are expected to rise by 40% and 35% respectively in 2050. So we have to act as soon as possible. We have to go fast, and also to protect our region, our area. And also we are very close to them, and we have common objectives, and especially after the last year of during the Ukraine war, of a big energy crisis. And the Mediterranean has a huge potential of renewable energy resources, and in particular solar and wind, but also opportunities for increased energy efficiency in all the generation use sectors. So therefore, we support in our common project energy transition in 8 beneficiary countries that are the countries of MEDENER plus Libya and Egypt. And we want to contribute to enhance their energy security and foster the transition to low carbon economy. We established the MeetMed regional expert network, composed of more than 120 experts from our energy agencies and from other colleagues of RECRE, of 13 Mediterranean countries, actually 14 including Libya. And we work mainly on energy efficiency and renewable energy strategies and policies, monitoring tools. Our main focus in the second phase of the project are the sectors of buildings and appliances, because they are in the region the most consuming sector, but also industry is at the 3rd place after transport. So our experts support national governments to implement energy efficiency policies and measures, also with policy recommendations. Going to the industry field, more in particular, we developed some studies and some collaborations on that. All the countries have national energy efficiency and renewable energy strategies, also NEAPs and REAPs, but the implementation is really evolving at a slow pace. One common point that's to be clarified before talking about that is that the region was previously characterized by strong energy subsidies. And of course, energy subsidies keep energy prices very low for consumers and acting as a barrier to the success of the energy efficiency projects in all economic sectors in the region. Now, most Arab countries are adopting strategies and reforms to reduce energy subsidies, also to achieve energy security, and of course to reduce budget deficits. So the interest for energy efficiency in all the fields, but of course also in the industry field, is growing. Many of the countries have already removed the energy subsidies, and some of them are working hard to remove the energy subsidies. Of course, the industry, the largest industry in the region is the petrochemical industry still. And even if there are energy importing countries that invest more in other industries, but the largest part is represented by the petrochemical industry. And among the barriers that we have, that the countries see as the most important barriers are, of course, investments in energy efficiency do not represent a priority compared to, for example, to the increase in productive capacity. There are not many energy efficiency services providers with the necessary competencies to identify saving opportunities. This is needed. Energy efficiency is not incorporated, for example, within the procurement decisions of industrial facilities. And there are a lot of inefficient equipments that are dominating the market because of the low upfront cost, coming also from Eastern countries, and therefore we are working together in our projects also to address policymakers and decision makers. And of course, no strong regulation is imposed for the import of low quality, inefficient equipment. So there's clearly a need to develop policies to encourage energy efficiency in the sector. Besides energy savings, policies can contribute to reducing pollution levels, of course, and particularly to improve productivity and cost effectiveness. And this is very relevant, and the countries are now starting considering also these aspects. For example, mandatory energy audits, energy consumption reporting, assignment of energy managers are examples of measures that are starting to be taken by the countries. Apart from Libya, every country implementing or is implementing measures to promote the use of efficient equipment, to implement technologies, for example, cogeneration, trigeneration technologies, in order to optimize the industrial processes, and also measures to increase energy efficiency in production projects. Regarding energy audits, for example, many of the countries have mandatory energy audits in place for energy-intensive industries. For example, in Algeria, they are mandatory just on energy consumption of over 2,000 TOE per year. In other countries, the threshold is lower, for example, in Morocco, and also companies using more than 1,500 TOE per year must either carry out an energy audit or be ISO 50001 certified. And then other countries, for example, Tunisia and Lebanon, and they are trying and starting enforcing the energy audits and putting some regulations. So from our point of view, there are three kinds of interventions that are needed. Regulatory interventions that are required, and in particular to ban the import of low quality, inefficient equipment, technical interventions and training, and also support to scale up the deployment of renewable energy sources in the industry, and of course financial interventions that are needed, incentivize financial schemes to upgrade also the production line, but also to support energy efficiency interventions and installing renewable energy systems. About the financial part, I would like to say that
Roberta, thank you. Can I ask you to bring the financial part for next part of the roundtable?
Yes.
I apologize
sure.
to interrupt you. So we move also to the other part, and would be interesting to connect this with the other part, which will be on small, medium-sized enterprises. Before this, you mentioned lots of interesting topics and a great overview of what's happening on the other border of the Mediterranean. You mentioned also energy audits and energy management systems, which are two topics of very strong and relevant interest for the EnR network agencies, based on the consultation we made a couple of years ago. Is there any reaction on these 2 points, energy audits and energy management systems, even if certified under the ISO or not? Just any hint or any comment from your side, Dietmar?
Yeah, but because in Germany we have now, I think, about 1/3 of the entire certified energy management systems are 50,001 management systems are in Germany, I think, or at least that was a couple of years ago. I think we're quite still high, but what we experience now with energy management system, that if we made a survey here asking companies, small to medium-sized companies, on how they experience energy efficiency or the energy management system in their company, and only 1/3 of them said that would help them. That was basically emphasized the implementation of energy efficiency measures. The other 2/3 didn't really, were skeptical. So here I think we need to tackle a bit more. I need to focus more on how you can really use, because I strongly support energy management systems, and I think they're really helpful. But you have to live in. You have to really. They need to be a substantial part in the governments of a company. And here I think there's still a lack, especially in Germany, or could also be in other countries, that they have maybe the system in place, but it's not really lived.
Thanks. Dietmar, Stefan, please.
Yeah, thank you. Also in the management systems, we have both on the empirical side experience with companies, but also face-to-face exchanges with some entrepreneurs. And after some stimulation approaches fell off, we also learned from some companies who formerly had ISO 50001 certification that with the reduction of the tax benefit, they have no interest in maintaining the certification, because they consider it too much effort for what it's worth. That doesn't mean that they do stop using management system approaches. They only stop ISO. And also on a larger scale, we found that it actually doesn't really matter which approach is taken as long as it's structured. But the big issue is that the micro and small companies, to a large proportion, don't do any structured approach, or at least as of the data that we have. However, I think we very soon start gathering new data, which will allow us to find out what the current state is. And that will be in Germany. However, we have also a system where we can gather such data for many countries within Europe. And what matters in those management systems is to achieve progress. It's like with the energy audit obligation. If we audit but then don't do anything, that doesn't help. We need to find ways to stimulate the implementation. And with implementation, one can implement something, but we also need to guide and help companies so that they implement impactful things.
Thank you. Probably for large enterprises, this will turn into an obligation, according to the last versions of the new EED, to implement ISO 50001 above a certain threshold. Thanks, Stefan, and please, Rod. Oh, sorry, you're muted. Oh, now it's perfect.
No, here I am. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. No, I'm having a heat pump installed, and the guy was just coming in the room to test the system, and I told him 5 minutes. No, energy management is incredibly important. And it's important for one thing, especially in SMEs, to change the culture. For an SME, everybody is part of the solution. If it has to in a factory, even somebody working in the head office. One of the things we were doing and I think in terms of, I mean, Stefan was talking about improving how to stimulate impact in that. I was involved in the Investor Confidence Project. There's also Trust EE, there's eQuad. We were working with SMEs mainly. They need help. They need an intermediary who can guide them through the whole process. So take the asset owner, the factory owner, or the factory team, and what we have is a standardized approach, so following certain protocols, so that, and we lined up the banks. They said if those projects are certified under those protocol that you develop, we'll fund it. Don't even ask any question. Okay, we will fund it. And but one of the problems we have in Europe is whether there's 3 or 4 of them. They're all too small. I don't know how we take it to scale. And I think this is going to be a challenge for the EnR network to try and help figure out how do we do that. I was working in Turkey not that long ago, where the World Bank set up a $100 million fund for SMEs for energy efficiency, just energy efficiency. How much of it was used? 0. Why? Because those SMEs didn't have the time or didn't have the capacity to develop the business case to go to the bank. And this is where an intermediary can help. I was explaining to some of the ESCOs, I said, this is free money for you. Just knock on the door and help them. And in part of it, there's a lack of an entrepreneurial culture, even amongst ESCOs. We find this, we've mentioned the mandatory energy audits. Well, how many of those audits actually implement those projects? Italy is is the one country that's probably doing the best, part of the Flemish region as well. This is not rocket science. We can do it, but we're not doing it. And it's not, we can play with all different types of gimmicks, but a lot of it is just, it's quite simple and straightforward that we can do. And this is what we're trying to do in EFIG, and then also in the continuation of it. We talked about energy management. I should just give a punch. I'm also on the board of the European Council for Energy Efficient Economy, and the IEA, we have a couple people from the IEA here, just asked us to put on a side event on energy management in industry on the 6th of June. And we've actually expanded it to be industry and SMEs. Okay, so so we're including buildings as well, commercial buildings or hospital, larger buildings. So there are things happening, and also for ECEEE, we're also holding another zero carbon industry conference in November probably. And last year in November we had a one-side event on financing, which was really good, because we actually brought together the EIB, the Commission, and many others to really look at how do, where is the money? And it is hard for banks for dealing with SMEs because of the whole issue of due diligence. I mean, we don't even know if an SME is going to be in business next week. It's not easy for banks to come through that. This is where we need more guarantees and more support from at the national level. That's why I mentioned the Strategic Banking Corporation in Ireland as being stellar that way, working with 35,000 SMEs to really help them that way and improve energy efficiency. Anyway, I'll leave it at that way. I'm not sure they're going to come in and bother me again, but anyway.
Thank you, Rod. You already brought into the discussion the topic of SMEs, which was the second topic I wanted to talk about. Please, Dietmar, floor to you, and if you can also make connections with this interesting topic of SMEs, which is a very small word containing so many things.
Rod, I just want to respond to you, or maybe some approval. I completely agree that you need an intermediate person or maybe more support here, but I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a person for medium and small enterprises to implement energy management systems. It can also be a network. It can also be like other companies, you doing that, like bringing them together and having maybe an intermediate person on top of here. So the concept of energy efficiency networks, which we are currently working on in Germany, but I'm surely other countries are working also on that topic, and I know about that. But that's something companies that participate here not only have the focus surely energy efficiency is a focus of this group, but it's also the interaction between with other companies, and also have how are they doing it, maybe how they tackle problems. Getting those people together also gives an additional benefit to this entire thing, and these companies are much more willing to use their energy management system more effectively, I would say. So this I wanted to add, Enrico, and yeah, pass on.
Thank you, Dietmar. Very interesting. I'll go now probably to Sveti, if you wish, based on what our panelists said. How do you see this support to SMEs in Bulgaria? What's your experience, your learnings from the programs you managed? And also remember, there are some interesting ones covering several hundreds of SMEs, which proportionally to the number of SMEs in the country is a very, very interesting result. We have some difficulties, for example, here in Italy. Rod said a good thing, I say bad one for my country to address what is below this big world of SMEs. I mean, for energy-intensive SMEs, everything is going very well. For non-energy-intensive, it's totally, totally different. Please, Sveti, your comments.
First of all, I very much agree with Rod about this. Well, the SMEs basically they struggle to exist, especially nowadays with the energy crisis last year. They put all the resources on survival. In the energy efficiency and renewables or sustainable development of the company or whatever else, was a little bit put aside, and that's very much understandable. We all agree. I mean, people who are experts in the sector or dealing with energy efficiency somehow, we all agree that energy efficiency is a solution for a crisis. Unfortunately, it's not a cheap solution. So it's even though the SMEs realize that the energy efficiency measures, the renewables or whatever else would drag them out of the crisis, they cannot do it. Cannot do it because they don't have the resources, they don't have the manpower, and also, as Rod said, they don't have the knowledge to develop a project and to apply with it to the financial schemes that we have. Well, the previous financial period that we had in Bulgaria targeted the SMEs as a target group for financing energy efficiency and renewables measures. Well, it operated in a little bit easier environment. I mean, there was not energy crisis, and it was easier to attract the interest of the small and medium enterprises because they had the time to pay attention to this, and they decided that, okay, that's great. There is up to 50% grant for technological equipment, energy efficient equipment, and it was a perfect solution. Now it's a little bit different environment, as I said, and they definitely need someone intermediary because yes, they know the money are there. Again, the programs that are open, the money are there, but they don't have the powers to go through this, to develop a project, to go through an evaluation of this project. So it's very important, this intermediary. Even this idea of Dietmar of some for a network of SMEs that could be they could be provided with this centralized intermediary support is actually a very good one, because the SMEs, some of them are even micro enterprises. They definitely don't have the skills to even research, let's say, on internet, even to research all the opportunities that they have. So we need a information campaign, let's say, and also very targeted one for the different SMEs, and targeted exactly to to the benefits and to the results after the measures implementation, so they could realize that the efforts put on project development are worth, let's say.
Thank you, Sveti. Stefan raised the hand. Stefan, if you don't mind, I was thinking just to give the floor to Roberta and then leave you. You started and you will ask, you will pose your, you will do your comments and you will also conclude then our session. No worries if you can take also a couple of minutes more, we will manage it. Roberta, please, I'll give the floor now to you. First of all, if you don't mind to continue explaining your project actions or financial aspects, but if you can also connect this with the SME topic, that would be really useful and appreciated. Please.
Yeah, thank you, Enrico. Let's say that also in our region, in the Mediterranean, in particular in the southern countries, the barriers are almost the same. Everything has already been said about the barriers, the lack of financial and human resources, knowledge, awareness, and information also. And this is a result of the Leap for SME survey, and also our members replied to the survey of the project. And the most relevant needs are incentives, of course, qualified auditors, the need for training, and so this is more or less the same for the southern countries. The co-benefits, among the co-benefits, they see the reduction of costs, of course, the competitiveness they can have, the increase in the processes overall efficiency, and it's very important for them, including renewable energy sources as a co-benefit. So let's say that very important and very relevant is the financial support, financial incentives. And in our MeetMed project, we are tackling this issue, access to finance. We want to support governments, all the stakeholders, in particular dedicated to buildings and appliances, but not just to that, because we are replicating the initiative, as Rod said, of the EFIG, that's the SEI Forum. It's Sustainable Energy Investment Forums, and in general, the role of the EFIG, because the need is to understand and to put together different stakeholders. They don't understand, banks can understand renewable energy investments, but they don't understand interventions in energy efficiency, and particularly in our region. So we launched the Mediterranean SEI forums and national roundtables. That's an action inside the MeetMed project, dedicated to buildings and appliances, but where then talking and being together, stakeholders, different stakeholders as policymakers, as industry representatives, building construction sector representatives, and also technicians, experts like the energy agencies, working and being together in the roundtables, in the discussion that must become a permanent and a permanent forum of discussion in order to understand better. And I also think that data are needed to demonstrate the payback period. What's the advantage to have that? For example, the database of the EFIG, we are trying to replicate that in the Mediterranean region, and this is very much appreciated. In fact, last month we organized the Media CI Forum at national level in Egypt, and the Egyptian network was launched, and an energy efficiency fund is foreseen. Of course, they will be together from now on. Let's say they are running more than us, because the European SEI forums I think it started in 2016. And now we are still talking about permanent roundtables. So my final message is the countries are a bit behind us, but they are catching up really, really quickly.
Thanks, Roberta. And now, please, Stefan. Same topic, but you manage yourself, no worries.
Yeah, no worries. I think the role of technology is super important, yet we have the technologies invented. We need to be able to roll them out fast and big. So regulation and bringing taking away the barriers. The management systems are crucially important, because only if I know what I do and how I can do it in a structured way, it's like with everything in life, we can do it in the best manner and ensure that we don't overlook on huge potentials. Without money, many things aren't able. There are many things that can be done, but that involve the people engaging with the workforce, with every individual, and showing people up that they're not disempowered. So when a country sets a goal, one usually intuitively thinks it's the country's task to achieve that, but the country itself cannot do that. It requires every single stakeholder to be able to achieve such goals. And there, the awareness raising is an important thing. However, I think we need to look a bit deeper into the mindset, because the awareness can be, here's the information, or we do a campaign, but it requires a proactive pull from those that are meant to implement it. And there at the moment, we have discussed the situation of SMEs and how difficult it is for them even during normal times. From conversations we have had in different countries, they particularly perceive so much pain in so many different areas, from this poly crisis of inflation and how do I get my material and energy prices, emission prices, regulation, and everything takes too long. So and where do I recruit my personnel? So there's so many points of pain that that decarbonization and climate goals are so far away. We need to succeed in making the connection and use those, to us very often known, points of pain, and find the language to get through to them, to show them that the toolkit of decarbonization can actually help them reducing that pain, and that they're actually not disempowered, but they do have the means. And for that, we need to succeed in creating the perception, which is not awareness. It's like giving a few examples on how they can help themselves by, for instance, finding ways to identify energy waste. So energy that is not needed at all, and then find again easy means that may not even cost money to be as efficient as possible with the rest, and then plan ahead with those things that may take longer to kick in, such as technology change, fuel switch, electrification, and hydrogen. And once it's like when you go to when you have a conversation, somebody tells you about a really cool new product, you have never heard of the brand, and suddenly after that conversation, you will see that brand everywhere. It's like activating brain power to be able to identify things yourselves. It's activating the SMEs to identify those things and perceive also that they have the means to achieve something themselves. And if they translate that from the government, from the leadership level, which is easy, and smaller ones, to the whole workforce, they will make use of the swarm intelligence, because everybody knows his or her workplace and knows what's really annoying and what could be improved on. And as important government targets are, intrinsic results, if I understand the why, and if I have the means to do it, I can stimulate intrinsic triggers, and then the results are always much better. If we remove the barriers, that's really essential, as I mentioned in the beginning, because industry, at least German industry, indicated that they want to save about 22% of their 2019 greenhouse gas emissions by 2025. However, the infrastructure doesn't allow them to be able to do that. But even if those barriers are removed, it's like with New Year's pledges that we all have. If the barriers are gone, it doesn't mean that we're doing it. So we also need to go one step further, also on the policy side and in our circle, to actually find ways to keep nudging. And I think these things are crucial. So as I put also in the chat, mindset and getting through to those and empowering them to be able to do it themselves. And I think with this great network of facilitators that we have here, we can really leap forward big time. And I'm really glad that you invited me.
Thank you, Stefan. And thank you all for putting this information also in the chat, as also the previous speakers did. If you want to add anything, the chat is there. Links and studies are very welcome. We are on time, and I think I would not add anything to this very good and rich of content roundtable. Thank you, starting from last one, Stefan, and Rod, Roberta, Dietmar, and Sveti for your relevant contributions to this workshop. We will be in touch, of course, for future initiatives, and for the final closing remarks, I will now give the floor to Hugo and/or Emma from the International Energy Agency. Okay, very welcome. I can see you. We thought to conclude on some specific interesting topics on how industry has responded in previous crises and how to react in the changes of ARRI. And if possible, Hugo, this was the past, the present, what we can learn from past crises to improve our future, because when we have to do something in a hurry, it means that probably something hasn't worked well or hasn't been planned properly. Please, the floor to you for the final remarks.
Thank you, Enrico, and I'll try to tackle such a challenging question. So yes, I think you know, it is always useful to look back to see how to move forward. And one thing that we can see going through the data from you know, the last 50 years, so going back to the 70s, we see that energy efficiency only appeared during crisis. Of course, the first two oil crises were a major you know, impact on the energy world, and this is where of course the IEA was created, but also when energy efficiency appeared in the agendas of many Western countries. So that's at global scale. Now, if we look at, you know, more local crises over the years, I would recommend the work that the IEA published in 2011 that is called Saving Electricity in a Hurry, that takes, you know, several case studies, among others South Africa, that experienced very high prices in electricity due to lack of capacity and increase in demand in 2008 and 2009. Similar cases in Chile, where there were droughts, again, so environmental impacts, lowering the you know, hydropower capacity. So countries had to save electricity in a hurry, developing packages, as we mentioned. They were able to save up to 20% of savings. Japan, as well, is one of, you know, the countries that had to face very quick reaction to the Fukushima event and such. And we see that even though some policies were taken in a hurry, the effects were long-lasting. Of course, reacting to a sense of urgency allowed the government to say that it was not under their you know, power to restore prices. So we have this capacity today. If we look at what's happening currently with the inflation and the rise in energy, we see that the prices that triggered the Gilets jaunes movement in France have by far been exceeded over the recent years. And the difference is in one side we had the sense that it was government, you know, making those prices of fuel rise, whereas now it's something that we are, you know, just being victims of. What we have to fear, unfortunately, is that this type of crisis will, you know, happen more and more often in the future, in that, you know, we're going to be going from crisis to crisis. One angle that we must keep in mind is that energy is not an abstract element. It's, you know, an indicator of transformation, you know, changing heat, changing in velocity, etc. So what, you know, companies could be doing is carrying out CO2 footprints, but including all scopes, not for environmental reason, which might not be their main priority, but just to evaluate how much they are reliant on material inflows, because of course energy is just one, but we are also seeing that a lot of the supply chains are interconnected, and being able to determine how resilient we are, how the businesses are resilient to external commodities, raw materials, would be key. And CO2, of course, allows us to track that. It's a proxy for, you know, how much material, how much energy we're using in our businesses. You might have seen that bankruptcies in the European Union have gone up in the last quarter of 2022, of course, due to rising prices in energy, but also with inflation. Now looking forward, we have talked about technology, but according to the IEA's analysis, we see that 60% of the CO2 that we need to abate is coming from technologies that are not readily available today. So we must really, focus on the low-hanging fruits. Energy efficiency, again, is one key vector for that, but also material efficiency, trying to reduce the demand for key materials, cement and iron and steel in particular, by extending lifetime of products, lightweighting, of course, of vehicles and such. Also, maybe to remind that money is there. We have the capacity. Just to quote the executive director of the IEA that was a few weeks ago at the European Commission, the profits from oil gas in 2022 rose to 4,000 billion USD. 4,000 USD were the profits made by the oil and gas industry in last year. What we need to reach net zero is an annual investment of 4 billion. So just to compare that, we need 4 billion annual investment to engage in the net zero emission transition that the IEA has modeled, and the oil and gas industry just made 4,000 billion USD. So on that, of course, I'd like to close on optimistic views that we have the resources, we have the funds. It's just trying to make these connections. Maybe also to mention that we'll be having the Energy Efficiency Global Conference in June. We're very much happy to see colleagues here in Paris on that note. So closing maybe remarks would be that energy efficiency is a no-brainer as material efficiency in the years to come to as fast as we can engage in the transition that we dearly need. And I exceeded the time. I'm sorry, Enrico. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Hugo, for lots of food for thought, but also for the last proportion, which is impressive. The 4,000. Oh, thank you very much for your intervention, to the colleagues of IEA, ADEME, the Joint Research Center, to the panelists of our roundtable. So SIDA, Tina, EnR, then we have Stefan for the UNICE group of experts on energy efficiency, and Rod, of course, from the EFIG Industry Working Group, together with Nelson, which introduced our session. I think it's okay to conclude. I wouldn't add anything to this perfect conference or workshop full of interesting hints and comments. Thank you very much again. The presentations will be made available, and I hope to see you soon in our next meetings. It's probably our first one for the working group, which we'll do open to external audience, but let's plan to do many more of these. We had today a peak of probably 150 participants, a little bit less, but still more than 100 at the end, just for you. Thank you very much again, and wish you a nice day, and looking forward to next rounds of cooperation. Bye.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.